Fireside CharLA series brought to you in partnership with the United Latinx Fund and Latino Coalition of Los Angeles. I'm Richard Corral, Interim Executive Director of the United Latinx Fund. This online event series aims to engage, educate, and advocate on important and timely topics that impact LA's Latinx community during the current time of crisis. I'd like to quickly thank our sponsors, JP Morgan Chase and Southern California Gas Company, for their commitment to and investment in nonprofits like the United Latinx Fund that work to transform, uplift, and improve our community quality of life. Our program is designed to engage you, our audience. So please, if you have a question, enter it into our chat box. We have a moderator for our chat box, Cindy Villegas, and she will be diligently observing the chat box to ensure that all of your questions are captured during the Q&A. Please note that everyone's audio and video will be muted until the question and answer session. Also, tonight's program is streaming on Facebook Live. So to access the video, please visit the Latino Coalition of Los Angeles' Facebook page, and Cindy will be providing a link in the chat box right now. Our program is about to begin and will cover two very timely topics: people's budget and defunding the LAPD. As we know, there have been protests all over the nation to elevate the issue of police brutality and particularly the murder of our Black community members. It has elevated a moment in time that centers around defunding the police, and proponents have argued that incremental reforms have not worked, and that a better solution is to really address the underlying factors that contribute to crime, poverty, and homelessness, namely the inflated budgets of police forces, and to reallocate those funds to social services such as housing and to youth services. Also, we'd like to address the operating budget of the LAPD, which is over 1.8 billion, mostly in salaries. Frankly, that's 54% of the city's discretionary spending that's dedicated to law enforcement. So to that end tonight, we offer and are proud to host Councilmember Curren, who is an integral part of the discussions that I just mentioned, as he is the vice chair of the city's Budget and Finance Committee. He's also the only African American and person of color on that committee. Councilmember Price has helped introduce a motion that reallocates approximately $100 to $150 million in LAPD funds for programs supporting communities of color. And without further ado, I introduce our homegrown council member who has kept true to his word of spearheading the new ninth by ensuring large investments in South LA, building affordable housing, championing causes important to the working class and immigrant populations. He carries a very important role within the People's Budget movement, and we'll cover and address that today. Councilmember Price, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Richard. It really is an honor for me to join you and members of the Latino Coalition and the United Latinx Fund. I just admire your activism, your commitment, individually and collectively. These are important and exciting times that we're in, and you are all leading by example. And I just appreciate the chance to be with you this afternoon. We certainly know that there have been a world of changes in our world with the COVID-19 and certainly the demonstrations in the street. And so the air is ripe, I think, for change and for innovation. And I'm hopeful that you all will be a part of that process as well. But let me begin my remarks today, if I can, by just acknowledging the landmark U.S. court decision that ends the legal nightmare for 650,000 dreamers whose presence here honors the foundation of what it means to be a true American. And this is a very sensitive issue for me because I've got thousands of dreamers in my district and who we've supported. These dreamers can rest easy knowing that they will continue to pursue their passions, their purpose, and their ambitions without fear of being ripped away from the only country they have known as home, taken away from their families, their friends, and their loved ones. And so I just want to say bravo to our dreamers who've had to overcome persevere and go up against an administration that has tried everything in their power to make them feel unwelcome. But it is an opportunity for us to write a new page. So while this is a win, we can't rest until each dreamer has a clear pathway to citizenship, submitting their futures as Americans. And so that's the ultimate goal. But I just want to take my hat off to support our dreamers. But let me update you on what's been happening in City Council the past several weeks. Certainly, we've heard the demonstrations in the street. They've been loud and they have been clear and unambiguous. One, rethink, reconfigure public safety, and let's figure out a way to create better racial relations in our community, more equity, more fairness, more honesty. On June the 3rd, again, with the background of all these demonstrations and activities that are going on June the 3rd, I authored a motion to cut between $100 million and $150 million from the police budget. This is a $1.8 billion budget. And quite frankly, up to early June, the mayor had proposed a budget with an increase in funds. And that increase was likely to be approved, as we routinely have done in the past. But with the demonstrations, with calls for greater accountability, with calls for unfunding the police, it provided a ripe opportunity for us to move in a new direction. And so the idea of reallocating $150 million for some was thought to be just unfathomable. But we're seeing now that it is moving forward. In fact, on June the 15th, we took part in a historic presentation with the People's Budget. They made a presentation before council, before a committee, I should say, outlining their issues and their concerns. And again, speaking not only their behalf, but on behalf of more than 50 community-based organizations that have been looking at this issue over the past several months. Immediately following the presentation, the Budget and Finance Committee that I'm the co-chair of voted in favor of supporting the motion. And I'm glad to say that on June the 16th, last Tuesday, City Council cleared the way for work to begin on figuring out how we can reduce the police budget to that number. The plan also calls for a very robust community engagement in this process. And so on the 22nd, June the 22nd, the Budget and Finance Committee is expected to discuss exactly where these reductions are going to come from. We'll be getting a report from the CAO and CLA about potential alterations and changes. And so again, this is going to be an opportunity for all of you to get involved, to be engaged, to review the report, and to chime in with your ideas, with your suggestions. The time is now to become a squeaky wheel and one that can really make a difference. Some ask, well, gee, what's the next steps to reform the LAPD budget? And how can our organization and others be involved as we move forward? Well, quite frankly, one budget is not going to fix everything. And certainly while the amount we are proposing to shift is historic, we know that it can't be just a one-time deal. In fact, the city's budget is going to be reviewed and adjusted throughout the year. So this is just going to be a start. So I'm just encouraging you to talk to your council representatives, board of supervisors, other community leaders, expressing your concerns, expressing your thoughts, expressing your ideas about where the cuts should come from, where they should go. The people's budget is going to require all levels of government to work together and each jurisdiction to step up to the plate, again, in ways that we haven't before. We need to talk about ways to improve the safety net of programs that impact our families and our kids. My office certainly has demonstrated a commitment by organizing food giveaways, senior meal deliveries, diaper distributions, bringing testing to our neighborhoods. But we got to do more. And on a policy level, again, we certainly have worked to enhance renter rights and worker protections. But there is an opportunity for us to really re-engage our budget. And that's really how you express your values. How do you spend the money? And so we are very, very excited about this process.
Thank you for your leadership and for sharing a bit about the actions that you've taken so far, and sharing a little bit about sort of the macro level activities and strategy that's at play, not only at council, but also at the community level. But we'd like to get a little bit more into some details. So can you share from your perspective, what do you see as the next steps in order to reform the LAPD budget, the people's budget? And then how do you see, as you were sharing a little bit more about the important role of community, how can the United Latinx Fund and the Latino Coalition of Los Angeles and our vast network of nonprofit and for-profit community stakeholders help to move the next steps forward?
Right. Well, I mean, again, you can play a role by stepping up and being a part of this discussion. How should these funds be reallocated? The opportunity to provide training programs for our youth, job training programs, employment programs. How do we support employment for our citizens, those who are unemployed, those formerly incarcerated, those who have been veterans, those who need to be retrained or who may be out of work? How do we support our businesses during this process? Should we have monies for grants, for loans, for other programs that can assist? Again, these are the hard decisions that we're going to be making, and I don't have the magic answer. There are going to be a series of presentations made, and you're going to have a chance to weigh in on those presentations and to submit your own ideas, your own thoughts of how these funds need to be reallocated or allocated in a way that more accurately meets the needs of our community. We know that our areas, our communities have been left behind historically. The mayor talked about making an investment specifically in Black and brown communities. And so while we're concerned certainly with infrastructure, with roads, conditions of our sidewalks and our streets, we also are concerned about the conditions of our minds, of our spirits. And so that's why it's important that we provide resources to assist our young people develop and grow as they can. In my district, 250,000 citizens. A third of that population is under 18. And so one of the many reasons why I support not only the Dreamers, but other programs that support our youth. And I'm a product of the community. I grew up in the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, I attended Normandy Avenue Elementary School in the district. And so we have to find ways to make the system work better. When we talk about, for example, our police department and our police force being more representative, we've asked the police department to come back with ideas about how they can recruit more effectively from our communities. Maybe there is an advantage that we give LA Unified School District graduates in applying for the police department. I think it's clear the police department, as we've known it in the past, is going to change. And there are a number of proposals presented to alter the responsibilities of police, taking away some of the social service activities, put them in the hands of professionals, mental health and other kinds of professionals, so that we're not just calling the police every time there is a need for dispute resolution. So again, I have a rambling answer, but the point is the plate is open. There's an opportunity for you to really have some say-so and some input at a time when change will be made.
And we appreciate that, and are definitely poised and ready, as you've already sort of experienced firsthand, to be a partner and to be someone that can be a body that can be relied upon, but also a body that is constructive and really wanting, like you, to optimize this opportunity. One quick note, I do want to remind folks to please do put your questions either in the Q&A or in the chat box. We do have Cindy, who is actively engaged in making sure that folks' questions are being read, as well as summarizing them in a few minutes for the Q&A. Un breve anuncio, por favor. Si quiere escuchar este programa en español, por favor, seleccione español en el menú abajo. Gracias. And be sure to put your questions again in the chat box. We are going to be entering our final question, which is around nonprofits. Obviously, we are a philanthropy, and nonprofits are our bread and butter. As you know, Councilman, we even launched the campaign for nonprofit resilience in order to ensure that our nonprofits remain stable and strong. And what I'm hearing from you today, sort of my main takeaway, is that you're saying that this is really a new era, and that there is many opportunities on the table. So to that end, let's focus on nonprofits, and let's focus on the potential for nonprofits to support and engage some of the solution making going forward. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, one of the motions I introduced on the 16th would require unarmed, non-law enforcement agencies to respond to non-violent situations as an alternative to dispatching a police officer. This is a model made up of social workers, service providers, medical professionals, mental health workers, homeless outreach workers, other skilled professionals, certainly representatives from the nonprofit world, who can be brought to bear in solving problems, in dispute resolution, and providing other alternatives. We need to figure out a way that we don't have to call in the police, the armed police, to resolve every issue, every dispute that we have. And so I think there's going to be an exciting opportunity for nonprofits to step to the plate, to fund the efforts of others engaged in that kind of activity, to certainly promote the study and the practice to do that, and to encourage individuals to think out of the box, and to expose the community again to organizations and individuals that are committed to the community in ways that we've not seen before.
That's music to our ears, Councilman. And I have some exciting news, is that and I shared with you earlier that for today's Q&A, we are going to share the stage tonight with our multicultural, multi-generational collaborative coalition, and they're going to be spearheading and leading tonight's Q&A session. So Cindy, I'd like to pass over the mic to you. I know you've been diligently monitoring the Q&A, and I also know you've been working closely with Victor and Edwin and others to cultivate some questions from our collaborative. So Cindy, take it away. Let's make sure Cindy is unmuted. One second. Cindy, are you there? Okay. So in the absence of Cindy, we might be having some technical difficulties. Oh, she got kicked off the Zoom. So I guess it was something that happened unintentionally. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead, and I've been monitoring the questions as well. One question that keeps coming up, and it's actually a question that I've had myself, is how was the 150 million agreed upon how was that number arrived? I've heard a couple different things, but it'd be great if you could provide some clarity.
Well, we had some discussion, my co-presenters and I certainly had some discussion over that. In fact, we made a range. The motion says from 100 to 150 million. In reality, for example, the police department spends about $100 million on overtime. Probably another 25 or so million on training. So there are some pots that certainly are possible. Now, some would argue that 150, that's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. That's really that's no change, but it is, and it's a significant amount of money to reallocate. And as I said, this is not going to be a one-time deal. This is certainly not going to be a one-time budget. My hope is that going forward, these spending changes will reflect our values and reflect our commitment, a new commitment to our communities. And so it's a starting point. As I said, we've asked the Chief Legislative Office to come back with a list of recommended cuts up to that figure. We're going to be reviewing them next week, and you'll have a chance to review them as well, and to see if the recommendations make sense. Do they hold up? What about this? What about that? Why aren't you taking this? Why aren't you taking that? So there's going to be an opportunity for that kind of discussion.
Excellent. As a related question, I did some quick research, and in fiscal year 18 and 19, overtime for LAPD was $167 million, more or less. And so as an organization, as a philanthropy that's interested in nonprofits, I do know that there's a current sort of city process for getting event permits that force nonprofits and others to use LAPD as security. And so I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity there to kind of divert some of that overtime funds to some of the nonprofits that clearly would be in, I think, a better position to potentially keep the peace when it comes to community events and what have you.
Well, yeah, that is certainly a possible reallocation, working with not only nonprofit organizations, but community-based organizations, providing services, again, in ways that we haven't. My motion envisions a model of a crisis response model made up of, as I said, social workers, service providers, medical professionals, mental health workers, homeless outreach workers, community-based organizations, nonprofit philanthropic organizations. There are a number of new models that are possible. And so I think it's going to create an opportunity for organizations to partner with each other. I could see a nonprofit or a foundation partnering with a community-based organization to provide a service. Everything is on the table now. And so this is an exciting time to be a part of this process, an exciting time to express your concerns and your will, and an exciting time to hold elected officials accountable. I can tell you, certainly from my perspective, we realize that talk is cheap, and now people want to see some changes. They want to see some action, some changes. I'm not only a council representative representing 250,000 citizens, 80% of whom are Latino, many of those working class, struggling, trying to make ends meet, supporting families and their kids. And so I'm not only wearing that hat as a representative, as a proud representative, but I'm also a 69-year-old Black man. So I certainly have feelings about these issues that have been raised about social inequity and the lack of adequate resources in the community. So I'm committed to making sure that these changes happen, that they're brought about. Some will find them slow and not fast enough. Others may think we're going too fast, but everybody's going to have a chance to have some say-so. And this is a critical time in history, one that we don't want to pass up.
And I do appreciate sort of the potential and the excitement and the opportunity and the openness, right? But I also do have to kind of offer a more serious, substantive question. And we do have someone on the line who has been, directly impacted by police violence, and has a family member who has been directly impacted by police violence. And we're trying to get a better understanding of, obviously, what council has and has not done around prosecuting cops that have killed our community members, and the lack of resources for families that have been affected by police brutality. And that has been, and again, we do have somebody on the line who has had literally to deal with that on a very sort of personal level and a family level. And so how do we keep that front and center, and how do we deal with that in a very real way? And I guess, to be honest with you, I don't think that most folks really think that a solution that involves the police in that particular case is really a viable solution. So again, as someone who has, as we have members and supporters here who have direct experience with police brutality in their families and prosecution, share a little bit about, again,
Yeah.
you're in a safe space and a progressive space. What are some of your thoughts,
I think a couple of things. Certainly, we're certainly sensitive to any and all the inappropriate police actions that have taken place over the past decades. And every area, certainly has a list of those events. Our hearts out always to families and friends that are impacted directly and indirectly. And I agree that we got to do a better. We have to do a better job. I think it's significant that the police commission, as one of its reforms, has agreed to employ an independent prosecutor, as well as an independent investigator on these type cases. Frequently, it's left to the district attorney and some other kind of process that frequently does not result in any action being taken against an officer in a shooting. And that just has to change. We want to make sure that justice is done. Having an independent person there, independent body, I think will be significant, and we'll see how that moves forward. The commission has also talked about putting a moratorium on the gang database, a database that falsely and inaccurately sometimes identified individuals as a gang member, marking them for life and really putting them in harm's way. And I agree, for a family who has suffered hurt and harm, it's hard to look at the police and say things are going to be different. But we've got to just force that discussion. And to the extent we can hold the police accountable for acts committed in the past, I'm perfectly willing to do that. I think that we need to be able to do that. And I think we are creating a culture and a process that's going to make that possible, certainly in ways that we have never, ever done before. And so, and for that reason, I think it's progress.
Thank you, Councilmember. I know, some of these questions are not only not easy, but also we're at a time where there's so much potential and so much opportunity that it may be difficult at times to kind of, hone in on one specific answer. But what I'm really taking away from today's conversation is a sense of openness, a sense of collaboration, a sense of idea making, a sense of partnership, particularly when it comes to the individuals and organizations that are leading at the forefront of our community. I just wanted to thank you for tonight's rich conversation and action-oriented discussion. We spent a lot of time talking about nonprofits throughout LA County, and ULF and LCLA, in response, as I mentioned earlier, had launched the Campaign for Nonprofit Resilience to ensure that our grassroots nonprofits, who primarily serve communities of color, withstand the current crisis. In fact, there's even been recent Forbes articles that have been talking about the forthcoming nonprofit sector crisis. So in closing, I first want to thank everybody who's already endorsed the Campaign for Nonprofit Resilience. Cindy, if you would be so kind as to put a link in the chat box. And again, thank you, Councilmember, for also your support. And we definitely would appreciate you sharing the link on your social media and your networks to ensure that we can continue to grow the campaign. I'm happy to report that we have over 1,000 signatures on the campaign.
Well, count me as 1,001.
1,001 today, so thank you for that, and we're shooting for 2,000 by July 1st. Please do tune in to next week's CharLA, where we'll cover the digital divide, presented from the perspective of many of our millennial and Gen Z leadership across our organizations. And we'll also include a discussion how to bridge generational impact for optimal digital success across Latinx communities. We're also going to be inviting our corporate telecommunications partners to the conversation to really figure out how we can all come together and collaboratively support each other in order to address the digital divide, which is especially important now more than ever, because folks need to be able to learn and connect, and connectivity is now important more than ever. So please do turn into that conversation.